Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Welcome to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. Glad to have everyone with me. Hope everybody had a fantastic Thanksgiving. And now that we're in December, we're in the Christmas season. So are you supposed to say Happy Holidays or Merry Christmas? You know, I really get tired of the war, so-called war on Christmas. I noticed we were waiting for the news to come on Thanksgiving Day. And in the evening news. And before they were doing that, they were playing the replay of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And I noticed at the end that they were, all of the hosts, Al Roker and the two women from the Today Show, I have no clue who their names are, were all talking about Happy Holidays, saying Happy Holidays to everybody. And then Al Roker kind of stepped in and said, and Merry Christmas to everybody. And I thought, I wonder if they did that primarily as a way to mollify those of us who still traditionally say, and I get Happy Holidays because we have Hanukkah and, whatever, anything else, but, Merry Christmas. And I found it odd that it stuck out like a sore thumb. Happy Holidays. This was a replay. You understand, this was a replay of the Thanksgiving Day Parade. So I was just catching the last few minutes of it as waiting for the news to come on, NBC Nightly News. And it was almost as if Al Roker was saying Merry Christmas. I don't know what's in his heart, so I couldn't tell. But just watching him, it made me wonder whether he was doing it because he genuinely wanted to say Merry Christmas to everybody, or he suddenly felt this obligation that, oh my gosh, we're sitting here saying Happy Holidays. People are going to complain about if we don't say anything about, Christmas. And after all, it is the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, which is the start of the Christmas season. So maybe we should say Merry Christmas. Anyway, random thoughts of Michael Brown as we get back onto the Michael Brown Unplugged regular schedule. I want to talk for a little bit about Twitter. It seems that Twitter now actually considers objective, verifiable facts actually worthy of being banned. And banning objective, verifiable facts as hate speech. Now, I would play the soundbite real quickly for you of Angela Merkel. The Chancellor of Germany was speaking to a group. I don't know what the group was. And all I could see was the translation in the closed captioning as she talked. And she was talking about hate speech and how we're going to have to limit speech, and in particular hate speech, in order to save free speech. And I thought, wow, I mean, that's like, okay, we have to burn down the house to save the house. It's insane what we're doing, not just in the United States, but all across the world with regard to freedom of speech. And I think this is probably one of the, if not the most dangerous trends. It's probably academic to argue, particularly for the United States. It's academic to argue whether or not, the Second Amendment and threats against the Second Amendment are the most consequential to freedom and liberty, or free speech. I would argue that free speech is, because free speech can be limited in ways that the Second Amendment cannot. They can try to do things like, I know the Colorado legislature is thinking about imposing new gun regulations as they go into session this coming January. They can only on the margins really do things, but they can't actually confiscate guns. They can't actually take away guns. Speech, on the other hand, you can whittle it down and keep whittling it down, particularly in the private sector, let alone the government sector. Now, remember, the First Amendment prohibits Congress from doing anything to infringe the rights of free speech. But in the private sector, we're finding more and more corporations, organizations, social media, companies, individuals, whatever it might be, that are doing everything that they can to limit speech. And almost always they do it in the guise of hate speech. And I have found that always to be fascinating, because when you think about hate speech. Hate speech is, maybe I might be able to tell you, yes, I think that is hate speech, or that is hate speech, or that is hate speech. But that's what I think. You may hear the exact same speech, and you don't necessarily think it's hate speech. You might think, well, it's crude, it's rude, it's really, not very nice. But where do you draw the line? And then a third person might hear everything that you and I heard, and that third person says, oh, perfectly acceptable to me. I've always said this about hate speech. Hate speech is how I interpret what you say. And when we start getting into the concept that I'm going to interpret what you say, and then based on my interpretation of what you say, we're going to make the decision whether or not to preclude or prohibit that speech, I think that is culturally, forget the constitutional aspect, I think that culturally that is one of the most dangerous things that's going on in the world today. And this story that emanates from Twitter, I think, is a fantastic example of that. You've heard me talk in the past about Andy Ngo. Last name is spelled N-G-O. Andy Ngo is this dissident gay journalist. He is a diminutive young man, not very large, very small in size. He's I don't want to say meek, because I think that does a disservice to what Andy Ngo does. He does terrific reporting on Antifa. He does terrific reporting on violence by these activist groups around the country, and he walks right into the middle of it. He wants to cover everything. And the last time he did so, which I think was in Portland, there's video of him just getting savagely beat. And so I can't call him meek. I just think diminutive is probably the better word. He's just small in stature, but he has more guts than most people, and he has more journalistic ethics than most journalists that I know. Well, he's now an editor-at-large at the Post-Millennial. Well, he ought to have known that Twitter would not permit him to cite facts. Excuse me. This is what he's getting in trouble for actually citing facts that dispute the transgender oppression narrative. He made the mistake of daring to question Chelsea Clinton and the left-wing activist organization, the Human Rights Campaign, for continuing to peddle this myth that transgender people are the subject of mass hate crimes and identity-targeted murder. So here's what Chelsea Clinton tweeted out. She tweeted this back on November 20. She tweets, since 2013, more than 150 transgender people have been murdered in the United States. The majority are black transgender women. On hashtag TDOR 2019, I honestly don't know what that hashtag stands for, Transgender Day of Recognition or something, 2019. Chelsea Clinton continues, we remember and honor the lives lost, hold their loved ones in our hearts, and must commit to doing all we can to end this epidemic of violence and hate. And what Chelsea Clinton was doing was retweeting a tweet by the Human Rights Campaign. The Human Rights Campaign on that same day had tweeted this. At HRC, Human Rights Campaign, at HRC is honoring hashtag TDOR, TDOR, to add our voices to the urgent call to support our transgender and non-binary siblings. Today we honor those who we have lost to fatal violence, the majority of whom were black transgender women. Now let me just make abundantly clear. I don't think I should have to do this, but I think any time that you're trying to point out objective facts, and those objective facts have to do with the number of people killed, for example, in mass shootings, whether that be in schools or public buildings, whenever you point, or car wrecks, drunken drivers, whatever you do, anytime that you're talking about the death of other individuals, there is, and I just think this is part of the political correctness culture that we live in, you have to point out that all of the deaths are tragic, regardless of how those deaths occur. But the problem with the Human Rights Campaign and Chelsea Clinton's tweet about these people being subjected to this epidemic of violence and hate was just simply not true. Most of those people, most of those transgender people, in fact, in the tweet from Human Rights Campaign, they have a list of names. Now, I don't know whether, because I don't have the tweet in front of me. I just have a screenshot of it. So I don't know whether or not they list all 150 names or not. But it says, for example, we remember. Then it lists Dana Martin, Jazelyn Ware, Ashanti Carmen, Claire Legato, a bunch of names, and then says at the end, and all transgender and gender nonconforming people lost this year. The point is this. Most of these people that Chelsea Clinton and the Human Rights Campaign say are subjected to this epidemic of violence and hate, they were not targeted and they were not murdered on the basis of their identity. Rather, when you look at the facts of each individual case, they just happened to be transgender when they were murdered. So back to Andy Ngo, the reporter. So Andy Ngo simply questioned the dubious narrative as to both the murder rates and the fact that many are carried out not by evil cisgender white males, but are actually murdered by black men. Now, according to the Post-Millennial, where he's now working, he tweeted this, quote, "The United States is one of the safest countries for trans people. The murder rate of trans victims is actually lower than that for the cis population. Also, who is behind the murders?" he asked. And then he answers, "Mostly black men," close quote. So here's his tweet, uninterrupted. "The U.S. is one of the safest countries for trans people. The murder rate of trans victims is actually lower than that for the cis population. Also, who is behind the murders? Mostly black men." Just a simple statement of fact. A simple statement of fact. And for tweeting that fact, Twitter banned him from tweeting, retweeting, or using most of the Twitter functions other than just scrolling through. Now, he's been off and on, banned and let back on, banned and back on. So at the time that you're actually listening to this podcast, he may or may not be back up on Twitter. But he was at least temporarily banned for that simple tweet. So he replied with a statement to the Post-Millennial. He said to his paper, "Stating a verifiable empirical claim with no value judgment attached is determined to be, quote, hateful conduct, close quote, by Twitter. The platform most used by journalists to communicate and counter fake news also actively punishes individuals for communicating truths when they are deemed politically inconvenient." The bottom line is this. What Andy Ngo said is a statement of objective fact. It is objectively true. Now, over at the Federalist, there's a reporter, or a contributor, I should say, by the name of Chad Felix Green. He has actually crunched the numbers. And by crunching the numbers, Chad Green has objectively demonstrated that most of the transgender murder victims that were cited by people like Chelsea Clinton and the Human Rights Campaign were not, in fact, targeted on the basis of their being transgender. Green showed that the majority were killed by black men, one of the apparently ban-worthy facts that Ngo cited. Now, when Andy Ngo also said that transgender individuals' murder rates are actually lower, that is apparently factually true, too. Research that was published in the American Journal of Public Health confirmed that. The American Journal of Public Health says that, quote, the overall homicide rate of transgender individuals was likely to be less than that of cisgender individuals. So what Andy Ngo was doing was stating two objective facts. And for saying that on Twitter, he gets banned for it, and Twitter does it on the basis that it is hateful conduct. So we are now living in a period when stating a objective fact, when stating a factually truthful statement, which I guess is redundant, factually and truthful, Twitter deems that to be hateful conduct. But let's think about this. Let's say that Andy Ngo had gotten the facts wrong, or he'd messed them up. I don't think that would even justify a ban, because liberal journalists aren't banned for stating or even misstating facts, because if that were the case, half of CNN's staff would have been purged from the platform by now. They wouldn't be allowed on Twitter. Think about the woman from Newsweek. If you haven't heard, there was a woman. She was a pool reporter. A pool reporter is where the White House press corps, rather than everybody in the press corps traveling with the president to Mar-a-Lago for the holidays, there's a pool that goes. So Newsweek assigns, Newsweek just happens to randomly get picked to send one of their reporters in the pool. Not everybody gets to go. So a Newsweek reporter goes. The Newsweek reporter is assigned by her editors to write a story in advance of Trump going to Afghanistan, to write a story about what Trump's doing. So this female reporter just simply took the standard narrative and talked about how Trump was spending the weekend golfing and tweeting and, not doing much of anything. That was before he left. She posted the story from the pool. Now, she wasn't one of the ones that got on the plane and went to Afghanistan. But when she found out that Trump was in Afghanistan talking to the troops, she tweeted out that the story was wrong. She deleted the tweet that had posted the story, apologized for it, and then explained that she had posted the story before she had learned about Trump going to Afghanistan. Newsweek fired her. Now, you can debate all day long whether she should have been fired or not. I don't think she should have been. I think she did what we expect journalists putative journalists, so-called journalists. She did what we expect them to do. She wrote a story in advance of anything really happening about, Trump's going to spend the holidays tweeting and golfing and goofing off. And then she posts, she sends the story to her editors. They write a headline. They put it up. She tweets it out in the story, right? Except that she then learns that, no, that's not what Trump's doing this weekend. He's actually taken a secret flight back to Andrews Air Force Base, to Joint Base Andrews, where he has boarded Air Force One in the hangar and then pulled out and quickly taken off with the lights down. I mean, if you've ever seen, I've never had the privilege of getting to do it, but I've seen it, of Air Force One taking off. I mean, it's just amazing. No lights or anything, just pulling down the runway, getting in the air and turning on the lights and taking off. It's fascinating. Once she learned that Trump was in Afghanistan, she withdrew the story and said she got it wrong. Well, she got it wrong because she just bought into the typical narrative. Yeah, I'm going to be lazy. Trump's going to be tweeting. Trump's going to be golfing, blah, 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 blah. But when she found out, no, that's really, not what he's doing, she corrected herself, deleted the tweet, told everybody, all of her followers, why she deleted the tweet and why the story was wrong. Yet the editors fired her. The editors fired her for coming back and telling the truth. No, Trump's not tweeting. No, Trump's not golfing. In fact, Trump's not even in the country. I posted the story before I knew he left for Afghanistan, and I apologize. It's the media eating themselves. And Twitter is doing the same thing. Now, I know that Twitter is a social media platform and a private company, and I know that, and I still debate this in my head, but I still come down on the side it's a private company. You don't have to participate in it. There are other ways you can communicate. You can do a podcast if you wanted to. There are other ways to communicate the stories that you want to communicate. Twitter isn't the only place to do that. So if Twitter wants to ban, either temporarily or permanently, Andy Ngo for citing objective facts, for stating the truth, for quoting what the Journal of Public Health states is true, well, that's up to Twitter. But woke activists and liberals, I don't think, should be entitled to be shielded from facts when they go on social media. Shame on Twitter for deciding otherwise. Because if Twitter keeps up this kind of ridiculous censorship and ends up slammed with foolish regulations as a result, they'll only have themselves to blame. Because that's kind of what they're doing. They're going down the typical crony capitalist route of, okay, we fear the government. We want to be able to continue what we want to do. So let's go ask the government to give us a tiny, tiny little bit of regulation. Well, the government might start off with a tiny, tiny bit of regulation, and then it will grow like a metastatic cancer. It will just get worse and worse and worse, and eventually kill Twitter off, and Facebook and Instagram and everybody else too. So I wanted to bring you the story about Andy Ngo, because when I talk about Angela Merkel or free speech and everything or anything else regarding hate speech, and how I think that's one of the most serious and dire consequences for individual liberty and freedom, bingo, there is a perfect example of what I mean. If we're going to ban hate speech, I want you to do a little mental exercise. I want you to do a little imagination. Imagine the regulations that would define hate speech. And then imagine a court system, a judicial system, trying to make it a determination about whether or not something is hate speech or not hate speech. And then imagine eventually getting to the point where, well, somebody has to make a determination about what's hate speech and what isn't hate speech. Angela Merkel must think that she herself can do that, or she can assign it to some commission or committee. Congress would do the same thing in this country. They would establish a department, a bureau, or someplace. They would put together a blue ribbon commission, and that blue ribbon commission would come up with regulations defining hate speech. And then the litigation, the lawyers would go back crap crazy, trying to figure out what is and what isn't hate speech. So Andy Ngo gets temporarily banned from Twitter for stating objective facts because Twitter thinks those facts are hateful. You know, facts are just neutral. Facts are just facts. Whether you think they're hateful or not, that's a subjective standard. The fact is an objective standard. Thanks for listening to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. Talk to you tomorrow.